Alright, time for another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com also, video presentation. So I did write a little bit, attempting to write something on the subject of entropy, and it ends up really being the subject of the fact that there really is only one universe. You really have to just talk about the fact that it's just about electrons and protons. It's not about anything else, and it's just about a force that's pushing them around, and everything else is an event in that universe. Like this whole blob of robot that's, saying stuff is, it's really just electrons and protons. They have to do it first. This can't do anything until the electrons and protons are forced by energy to do it. And that's pretty much the story. And how to say that, I've attempted to show it with the simulation. It just, the facts all point to this being the truth, let's say, and the evidence against any such statement I might make is always weak and thin, and in my opinion, it's exaggerated by physics. Physics says it's proven this and proven that, and shown this and shown that, but they really can't show you. They'll tell you there's quarks. They can't show you the quarks because their existence is deduced based on some sort of other kinds of evidence. So it's like the Invisible Man does something, and we're picking up little pieces of evidence of what the invisible thing did. And I'd argue that yes, there are things invisible, like the force of gravity. Can't really take a picture of it. You can only deduce its existence from the fact that stuff moves. But it's a real thing. Movement requires something real to happen. Okay. So anyway, I was trying to do entropy, and it just ended up being, you really do have to talk about something, the deeper truth. That first you have to understand energy, I guess, is the simple argument. And so I'll just read through what I wrote and see if there's any possibility that it, conveys the idea. And obviously I'm going to have to go a lot deeper than this, but I don't want to have to do the whole theory. I just want to be able to make an argument against their perception and their argument of what's going on, which obviously I would also argue isn't coherent. Energy changes form, doesn't say anything. Anyway, so I called it On the Migration of Energy Through Its Observed Forms. Okay, clearly I don't think there's forms, and the energy doesn't really migrate into anything. It's always doing the same thing. It has two states, is the argument. Anyway, I shall provide reasoning defending the proposition that energy itself never changes form, that the elements of what we call force have the same properties regardless of what object possesses the force of energy. The force or energy. So it's, there's just this elemental construction, and the elemental construction doesn't have various conditions. It only has essentially two, which I'll get to. Okay. I begin by proposing that energy or force is an elemental substance, so it's a real thing, made of discrete quanta of momentum. So it really doesn't matter what you imagine the force to be. Rocks or, cupcakes or little jellyfish. Doesn't really matter. The point is that the force conveys momentum. That's all that you need to know, is that it has something and it's capable of giving it to the thing it interacts with. Okay, in other words, energy exists elementally as bits of stuff moving the speed of force / light. So I'm also trying to get to the point where people understand the speed of light isn't the speed of light, it's the speed of energy, frankly. It's the speed of force. It's the speed of this elemental, invisible stuff that causes everything to happen. All right. This description of energy is quite consistent with Einstein's description of a specific form of energy, the photon. So Einstein's photon paper, where he first used the term, he first used it, other people used it, but he first used it, basically is saying it's made out of quanta, bits. All right, now he doesn't really illustrate how those bits might be visualized, and I would argue the simplest visualization is just to recognize them as a bit here, and then there's a bit here, and there's a bit here, and that stream is moving like a piece of Morse code towards a surface, and that's a photon. I merely alter the description to include other and some less detectable arrangements of energy quanta. So less detectable, sort of indicating that it would include this, gravity, and the other would be magnetism. Put simply, energy quanta can exist in two states: freely flying in a straight line vector at the speed of light force, or as a bit of energy attached to an electron or a proton, where it shares its momentum with the matter bit. So it really is that simple. The force bit is either flying through space at the speed of light, or it hits an electron and proton and sticks to it, and now the entire composite object has a momentum consistent with the energy the bit is providing. So it's somewhat slower than the speed of light now, some number slower. In the case where it is attached to a matter bit, the net velocity of the combined object will be less than the speed of light by some percentage dependent on how much energy quanta has been captured. So it could capture 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 100. And the more it captures, the closer it gets to the speed of light. But obviously, even if it captured 1,000,000, it can never go faster than the speed of light because it always weighs more than the elemental force bit per unit of momentum. So it's an automatic restriction on the speed of matter. Right. In its unattached, freely flying form, bits of energy quanta arriving at a surface with a specific frequency might be perceived as a photon. So I'm just, it seems a simple enough description. Now, obviously, polarization, I'd say, means that these things are at a distance. That would be the wavelength. And they're also out of sequence. They're in parallel flying, but they're not in sequence. Now the trick is you can make a photon with non-parallel bits when they hit a surface in the right sequence. So you're really just looking for the ... to hit a surface the right way. And if it hits the surface in the right way, without drawing it, almost like bullets from a gun on an airplane hitting the surface of a road. They have to hit in the proper sequence to provide the energy required to push the electron and cause electricity. Anyway, that's not in this. All right, restated, a photon is just a pattern in the time spacing of the energy quanta hitting a material molecular surface. So a photon really isn't in the space. It really matters on how it hits the surface. And depending on how it hits the surface will decide whether it's registered as a photon. Similarly, magnetism is likewise just a pattern that contains a polarized signature that can be interpreted, perceived by an appropriately polarized material. So it's basically just seeing something through a filter. And if you don't have the filter, you can't see it. If you have the filter, you can see it. You could write something and you could only see it under ultraviolet light, that kind of thing. So if you don't have the capacity to see the particular pattern, then you won't see it and it won't exist. So magnets don't affect us because our atoms can't react to the pattern. It can't see it, essentially. It can't detect it. But a piece of iron could. Okay. Of course, the quanta can also exist in a more chaotic default state where the bits carry no pattern. I would propose that this default state is the invisible energy that fuels gravity. So gravity is really just a phenomenon, and so you're basically just saying that what causes this phenomenon, okay, of motion, and the motion is being caused by the fact that the Earth is consuming all right, the force by attaching it to matter and moving the matter at a slower speed. So energy on the other side of the Earth doesn't get to me at the time it should, or does at the time it needs to compensate for the energy falling from the sky. So in effect, I'm caught in an imbalance. And the imbalance is heating the Earth as it is moving me. All right. When attached to an electron or proton, the energy quanta gives the electron or proton momentum. So that's already been stated. Yeah. If the electron or proton is part of an atom, that momentum makes a contribution to the net momentum of the atom. So the simple argument is, as you move the electrons and protons, they are in fact interacting with each other. So if you move one of them, you change the balance of all of them, and all of them can be moved, and so they'll all acquire this change in their momentum based on the fact that they will collect force and all move in that direction. So the atom moving is really the electrons and protons have to move first. That momentum makes a contribution to the net momentum of the atom. Motion in any large material object must first originate in the electrons and protons capturing momentum consistent with the large object's motion. So any of us big things moving, it has to move the little things first. First the electrons and protons, then the atoms, then the cells, then the blah blah blah, and you go on and on. And it's just about them being in this highly dense field of energy, and they extract, based on their interrelationships, pressure and move. All right. In simple truth, the only elementarily active or real universe is the one where electrons and protons are pushed by discrete bits of energy quanta. So electrons and protons are in the true empty black space, and the thing they're seeing, the only thing in their universe, is a dense field of this discrete little energy bits, and that discrete field will bombard them, and if they get hit by more on one side than the other side, they'll move in that direction in the 3 dimensions. All right, what physics describes as different forms of energy, like heat, thrust, or large object motion, actually have the identical cause of pushed subatomic particles. So there are no forms of energy. There's just forms of matter. So you can move a little piece of matter, an electron or proton. You can move an atom. You can move a molecule. You can move a compound. You can move human being, you can move an elephant, you can move a planet, and it all is the same exact mechanism that's making it move. That is, the mechanism is you have to move the electrons and protons. The little bits have to do it first, and we're just actions in that universe. We're just something that universe creates and does, but we're not the actual physical mechanism. We're not, I'm not going to say we're not real, okay? We're clearly made out of real stuff, but the only way we form something real is because of all the tension between the electrons and protons. They're actively creating the movie that is you, okay, the activity, the action, and that's all there is to it. There's, if we had the right glasses, we would see each other's little tiny bits moving around, okay, and it's just a universe of them, a huge, gigantic, insanely huge number that have been arranged by circumstance to have all of these functions, and they're all just made out of these composite substance of these elementally, the 100 elemental nucleuses that allow for the arrangements of all kinds of different configurations of force, of charge and magnetism, which ends up getting me into the subject of the fact that you have to kind of understand that there's two forms of the energy that are parallel to the existence of an electron and a proton. So just like there's plus and minus matter, there's plus and minus force, and there's an inverse relationship between the interactions, and that's why electrons repel each other and why electrons and protons attract. And so it's not a huge leap. I guess I might as well just pop an image of the simulation in here just to show the basic. Alright, there it is. Should be anyway. So the force comes in the same two forms. What distinguishes the forms, what makes a proton, an electron, the difference, it could be a shape, it could be the substance it's made out of, whatever. It's a tiny difference between the two kinds, but it's a difference that makes a huge difference in terms of how they interact. So there's just basically three interactions. A force bit can hit and stick, giving the object momentum. It can hit and reflect because it's already moving in the opposite direction, or it can hit and be changed in its orientation. So if a red hits a green, it pops out green. If a green hits a red, it pops out red. And that provides basically a perfect description of Maxwellian charge, in the sense that the reds radiate red, the greens radiate green. The green things are inert to the force of the red, so they don't have any pressure between them, and obviously the reds wouldn't like the reds because they're both pushing red, and the greens wouldn't like greens because they're both pushing green. But you can see they easily form into configurations consistent with the building of atomic nucleuses and atoms. So anyway, that's probably enough for now, and I might make some more videos with that title just to add on if there's necessary, but it's just a simple point to be made, is that there's just one real machine of the universe, and we're just complifications built out of the arrangement. This arrangement creates a capacity for large objects to have all of these features, but all of it happens in that universe first. If I have an idea, it happened in stuff doing that. It didn't happen in here. It didn't happen because it had to happen because this universe did it first. This little universe thought of it first, so to speak. Anyway, alright, so till the next, obviously not much room for a God in there. So it's that strict and mechanical. Strict rules, straight lines, no woo, no magic. Just really simple mechanical processes and such.